Miles Morales gets bitten by a radioactive spider, which happens much more often than you'd think, when Johnnie Torch Reviews Into the Spider-Verse. Well, welcome back everybody to Johnnie Torch Reviews. Today we're taking on sort of a late review, I know, of Into the Spider-Verse. About a year late, but what can you do? This was a film I was not particularly interested in because I am upfront going to say I'm not really a fan of Miles Morales. I'm not really a fan of Spider-Gwen or all the other... Well, I used to like Peter Porker, the Spectacular Spider-Ham. I did read that when I was a kid, so I kind of was interested in seeing him out of everyone, but it wasn't particularly something I was interested in, so I waited for Netflix. I waited till I got my free trial of Netflix, and so now I watched the film. So, not a whole lot to say about this film, to be honest with you, but I'm going to try to give about a good 20-minute review here and try to say what worked for me, what didn't work for me. We're going to go spoilers, so... You know, I don't suppose I need to say spoiler warning for a film that's been out for a year, but spoiler warning, spoiler warning, spoiler warning. We're going to get deep into spoilers with this. All right, now just to set the stage, I'm not really a big fan of mantle passings. I'm not really a big fan of passing the torch. And, you know, giving the mantle of a different character to somebody else. I've said this many times. I wasn't a fan of Wally West becoming the Flash, for example. That went on for several years in the comics, even though I was always a big Barry Allen fan. Kind of disappointing. Much the same has happened with Miles Morales. Peter Parker still exists, at least, but they tend to minimize him now because sort of like... the cool, up-and-coming new version of Spider-Man is what they want to kind of market. And obviously, for diversity purposes and everything. And the same with Spider-Gwen, which, again, is another character that I'm not particularly fond of the idea of taking Gwen Stacy and then spinning her character into something completely different than originally intended. She was not supposed to be a hero. She was... you know, she was just an every woman, you know what I mean? She was supposed to be a civilian. And now it's sort of like, well, we have to do the politically correct thing, which is make her a hero because we can't just make her a casualty. You know, that's not politically correct. So now she's a superhero and a spider person. I think her name is Spider Ghost now, even though I don't know what they referred to her in the movie. I don't think they particularly referred to her in the movie. Let's start at the beginning. We'll do some overview. I liked the color scheme. You know, the animation was... it was good and bad. It was good, but it was kind of distracting. Things were kind of blurry at times, and it kind of made you feel like if you had on, like, 3D glasses and at some points it felt like they were ripped off you, and they were kind of, like, blurry type... text or whatever, and that was kind of annoying. I think they could have done a better job of focusing on everything and not making everything feel like sort of soft focus in a lot of cases. I did like that they kind of tried to make it look like comic print. You know, you could see the like little colored pixels on people's skin. You know, kind of like that 4-color comic book look. That was an interesting idea, and to some extent it worked out, I thought, kind of well. They also did some cool but gimmicky things of having dialogue blocks on the screen, you know, the sort of meanwhile across town, you know. Or you would have maybe Miles thinking something and a thought balloon would go over his head, and you would still hear him speak, but it would still be over his head. I mean, those are interesting things that I don't fault them on trying to, you know, spruce it up, make it feel more like a comic book. Alright, so I was kind of with the film, the first act, I guess you could say, where Miles is I don't know, he's a kid going to a preppy school, kind of, and he kind of gets a crush on the Gwen Stacy version from this reality. He ends up getting bitten by a radioactive spider, and that was kind of problematic for me. I don't feel they set up very well a lot of the things in this movie. I think, again, I'm just going to kind of haphazardly go over things here like this, but they kind of just give a throwaway line, I can't remember his uncle's name. I know he was the Prowler. It wasn't Hobie Brown. They changed it. It was something else. But I actually liked that a lot. I liked his relationship with his uncle. His uncle is sort of a ne'er-do-well. We don't know that he's really, a criminal, but he seems like sort of just a ne'er-do-well guy. And Miles thinks a lot of him. And they do some like graffiti on the back of a building. And I come to find out this building, I guess, is some kind of scientific lab. We don't really know anything about the spider or the grand scheme of things and how this spider was experimented on, or why it got out, or why it has the ability to do what it does to Miles. But of course, the spider bites Miles. He gets the powers of Spider-Man and some more. This is also a thing that I found problematic because we're never explained to why he can do things that the original Spider-Man can't. He can turn invisible. Not really the kind of thing that spiders are known for. I mean, I suppose there are some that can blend into their environment, but he can turn invisible. He can fire venom blasts or something out of his hands. Now, that's something I think that also was attributed to Spider-Woman, which I didn't understand where she got that power either, but her origin was so different. I mean, this is basically the same origin as Peter Parker, where it's just a spider bite. So I didn't understand where those other powers came from. They never really explained it, or if they did, it just was sort of a one-line, throwaway line that I didn't pick up on. Again, I don't know. The rest of the powers are the same. The spider sense, the sticking to walls, and it kind of is like typical Sony movie Spider-Man, where he has all these goofy things go on to him because he doesn't know how to control his powers. So he's getting his hand stuck to Gwen's hair and stuff. And again, silly, wacky stuff. I think this film, and I said this on Twitter, I don't know if this would insult people, because I know this is a very popular film for a lot of people. Some people go so far as to say this is their favorite Spider-Man film, this is the best Spider-Man film. I can't personally see it. Film is subjective, art is subjective. I firmly believe that. So if this is your favorite, no offense. But to me, I think this film pretty much works for little kids. I think this is something colorful and, fun and flashy, and something that they would probably, dig if they really were not exposed to any other version of Spider-Man particularly. But I don't really see the depth in it that would cause me to put this even in the top 10. I mean, even the Disney Spider-Man films, bad as they are as Spider-Man films, they feel like they have some more stakes, some more depth. I don't know. So anyhow, to make a long synopsis short, Miles gets the powers of Spider-Man. He ends up coming across Spider-Man, who is having his battle with the Kingpin, who is trying to open up dimensional portals, because apparently his wife and son died in this dimension, and he wants to bring, apparently, another version of his wife and daughter, who would probably not recognize him, back through the portal and somehow resume his life with them, which makes zero sense whatsoever. So, again, it feels like a very superficial film. It doesn't feel like anybody thought this through very much. Spider-Man promptly dies, this version of Spider-Man, which I think they kind of tried to make it that this is the version of Spider-Man who was the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, which no, don't do that. Don't do that. But they have a lot of flashbacks of different things where they're showing him dancing to the James Brown song from Spider-Man 3 and so forth. He sort of tasks Miles before his death with stopping Kingpin's dimensional portal device, and he gives him the key, which the other Spider-Man calls the goober. And eventually the dimensional machine ends up spitting out a bunch of other spider people from different different dimensions in quote-unquote the Spider-Verse. So that's when we're introduced to the secondary Spider-Man, which is a down-on-his-luck, sort of middle-aged schlub who looks like a homeless person. They even say that. And this was the second thing that I objected to in the trailer when I first saw the trailer, which was my first inkling that I wasn't going to like this film, is they kind of have Peter Parker, this version of Peter Parker anyway, on the comeback trail, where he's a washed-up, you know, schlub. He kind of lost out with MJ. He ruined his relationship with her, and supposedly because she wanted children and he didn't want them, which again was something else that I thought was not in the best taste. I don't know. He just seems like a big loser. And then you have the fact that, like I said when I reviewed the trailer, this voice actor for Spider-Man is probably the worst voice actor I've ever heard. No matter what cartoon you've watched of Spider-Man, there was a better voice for Spider-Man. Just all of them. I mean, think of the worst Spider-Man cartoon you've ever watched. That guy had a better voice than this guy does. And that kind of disappointed me as well, because Spider-Man's always known for having like a real classic voice with, you know, the quips and the jocular attitude. So that kind of disappointed me as well. Miles kind of tries to get Spider-Man to take him under his wing to teach him the ropes, the webs, so to speak. He kind of reluctantly does so, and basically the rest is history. Other characters come out. I don't know if these are characters from the comics. I know Spider-Gwen, of course. Spider-Ham was sort of like a joke, a gimmick comic back in the, I would say the 80s, because I remember when I was a kid. And he's humorous to an extent. They don't do a whole lot with him. There is I don't remember her name, but there's an Asian kid, I think, that has a big robot that is powered by a spider, I think, that has the spirit of her father in it or something. Probably a totally unnecessary character, to be totally honest with you. I don't know if that's just sort of a sop to, I guess, maybe the anime market that did something like this with a Spider-Man-inspired character. I'm not sure. Again, not really that engaging of a character. There was the Noir Spider-Man, as you can see on the right here. He is like a black suit Spider-Man with 3D goggles protruding, and he's sort of like a noir type, a Bolts Bourbon type, I guess, with the suit and the hat. But he was funny. Nicolas Cage plays him. Not a whole lot done with him either. I just feel like we didn't get to know any of these side characters beyond peripherally. I mean, I probably would have liked to hear a lot more from the Noir Spider-Man, particularly. They don't really do a whole lot with these characters. Another problem I've always had with this concept is that I don't see Spider-Man as a team player. That goes even into saying, like, the Avengers. Spider-Man should not be in the Avengers. Maybe for the big world-shattering, Endgame type movie, but when it comes to being a team player, he's better off alone. So having all these characters together with Spider-Man, it's not really conducive to his character. I would probably say my favorite aspect, I think, of the film was, as I said, the relationship between Miles and his uncle. And his uncle is the Prowler, who's working for Tombstone. For Kingpin. Tombstone is in this as well, which I thought was a good choice, because we don't get to see him too often. They gave us some kind of retarded version of Scorpion, which, I don't know, didn't do anything for me. They gave us the female Dr. Octopus, which, again, I don't like changing characters and passing mantles, so that was disappointing. But I did like to see Tombstone, and he had absolutely nothing to do, really, in this movie whatsoever. We got the lousy version of Green Goblin, the monster version, which was a ultimate version, which I didn't like. He cameos. So the villains aren't that great. They had the absolute worst design for the Kingpin, which is basically just a big black square with a head sticking out the front. laughably bad, to be totally honest with you. The design for the face might not have been too bad, but it was the body that was this, like, big block. It was very strange looking, and it kind of took me out, to be honest with you, because most of the other characters are designed to be somewhat realistic to life. Except for him. I don't understand it. The Prowler, yes, excuse me, the Prowler being Miles' uncle was something I was familiar with, I think. I think even in the Homecoming, Donald Glover plays, I think, the character that is Miles' uncle. And I liked that relationship and sort of the relationship between Miles and his dad. You know, Miles' dad is sort of a overprotective father. He's a policeman. Reminded me somewhat of what they did with Captain Stacy in The Amazing Spider-Man, although this character was a lot more endearing than the other guy. I didn't want to punch him in the face. But, yeah, I liked that sort of family bond type thing at the heart of the story. That was probably the best part for me. And I like that Miles' uncle, when it's revealed that Miles is the Spider-Man, you know, his uncle still, it seems, hesitant to do anything. He's not purely evil, you know, he's just doing a job for the Kingpin. And when he finds out that his nephew is the one that he's been hired to kill, he kind of just, backs down right away. And I kind of felt like that was another emotional moment that probably could have been explored a little bit more. But he's killed pretty quickly by the Kingpin, probably too quickly. I think basically they kind of just wanted to remake the Peter Parker story with a black, I guess he's black Latino character. And he still has an uncle die because of crime. He still, is a teenager that's insecure, doesn't have a whole lot going for him. His uncle's like trying to teach him how to pick up chicks and stuff. Sort of the typical teenage stuff. So, I mean, that stuff was alright. That was kind of what I liked the most, but I was kind of hoping more for, I don't know, something more in way of Spider-Man. I mean, he finally gets the costume. Aunt May, this version of Aunt May is sort of like his Alfred, where he has like a cave full of costumes. I'm talking about the Peter Parker of this dimension. And she gives him a costume that he ends up spray painting and making it his own. And they have this fight that's like in this big colorful dimension bending machine. Again, kind of forgettable. I don't even really remember how the resolution kind of came about, but basically, push comes to shove. Spider-Man, the original Spider-Man wants to sacrifice himself, but Miles ends up saving him, and he ends up going back to his own dimension and, rekindling things with MJ, which was nice. It was nice that they tried to give Spider-Man his happy ending, even though, they kind of made him look like an ineffectual goof for most of the film. But again, I don't know. I guess that's just about it. That's kind of how I felt about it. I think if I was to compare what I know about Miles Morales, I think the PlayStation 4 story from that video game, I liked it better than this. The problem with that story was, I think, I don't like Spider-Man having a sidekick. And that's kind of what he was like, sort of like being positioned as in the video game. It's like, oh, well, he's, Spider-Man doesn't have a sidekick. It's not Spider-Man and Robin, you know what I mean? In this, Miles felt very much like his own character. I didn't really feel like he was under the shadow of, the original Peter Parker Spider-Man, which was probably the positive in this case. But I think the story itself probably was more compelling in the video game. Although in the video game, his father dies. In the movie, his uncle dies. And I think the uncle dying was probably a bit more stronger too, because, you could tell like that there was some, there was some thought put into that. I think, I mean, compared to with his father dying, obviously that's sort of an easy way to, you know, wring some angst and have him, you know, become a superhero. So, yeah, if I'm gonna, I don't know, I really don't want to rank this among all the other films, because I don't think this is a fair category for, you know, those were all Peter Parker Spider-Man films. This is a Miles Morales Spider-Man film. I think Peter Parker in this film wasn't that great, but he, you know, they kind of redeemed him a bit at the end. Again, there's a lot of stuff in there that's kind of nonsensical and kind of just goofy. If there's a sequel, I probably will see it, but again, I don't really know or care about most of these characters. So let me put a rating on it. I'd probably give this 3.5 stars out of 5. That's probably a C+. Because it's just frankly not my bag. It's not bad, but it's not really what interests me. I'm happy I saw it. I don't feel like I've wasted any time. You know, if it was a bad movie, you kind of feel like you waste 2 hours of your life. It was very competently done. Nice to look at. The voice cast was, for the most part, pretty well. I think they kind of drew Gwen Stacy to look a little bit like Emma Stone. I don't know if I'm mistaken on that. But for the most part, the designs are on point. You know, they look pretty good. With, like I said, Peter Parker being probably the most notable exception. But yeah, I'm going to give Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse 3.5 stars out of 5. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Did you really like this film? Did you think it was kind of overblown and superficial like I did? Did you wait over a year to see it like I did? What's your favorite Spider-Man movie? Let me know all these important questions, answers in the comments below. And let me know if there's anything else you want me to review that I haven't gotten to yet. Please check out the Daredevil Season 3 review I've recently done as well. And check out our show that we put on every Saturday on the only way to spend your Saturday here with us on Johnnie Torch Live. But until next we meet, this is Johnnie Torch reminding you once again, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.